Um, so last summer, when I moved back to North Carolina from California, I was having a lot of trouble catching my breath after some of my higher intensity paddles. And I wasn't sure everybody's scared about COVID, and one of the things there is like not being able to catch your breath. So I was kind of freaking out, and my Garmin watch was reporting that daily my pulse ox was so my blood oxygen saturation was around 87 and 90%, which was very suboptimal. It made me a little nervous, so I went out and got a finger pulse oximeter, and it said that I was fully saturated on oxygen. So that's one thing. How I'm using the pulse ox in my actual training, I'm just using it as a general fitness metric at the moment, but not for any lactate or anything like that. But yeah, it's a cool metric to have. I have one of those. I thought for a while I was gonna biohack and buy that Lumen. You breathe into the thing and it tells you if you're burning carbs or fat. And I thought between that and the pulse oximetry, I would be able to determine what kind of fuel my body was burning, but that's still to be determined. I will have like a full YouTube video with like pulse ox, carb versus fat burning, because whether you're burning carbohydrates or fat would potentially influence your blood oxygenation as well. So if that becomes something worth sharing, I will definitely be sharing it. But right now it's just a bunch of unrelated metrics. Hopefully I've got my lateral thinking cap on. Hopefully the puzzle pieces fall together and there's something really cool to share there. But right now they're just neat features. And I did in the heat. So I deduced that the times that my Garmin watch was saying that my blood oxygen saturation was low, I think it was related to the fact that in North Carolina, the air it's so humid. It actually mimics the high altitude style training because there's less oxygen available when the humidity is so high. All right, what else, guys?
If we're talking to Garmin, GO2 Max, I got the Garmin Fenix 6, and I was told to ignore that VO2 Max, but it constantly tells me poor. I really just hate that. So it's not really a question. It's just every time it pops up when I go running, I'm kind of an older fat guy, so it tells me 37% poor, and I'm like, I just get tired of looking at it. I don't know how to turn that off.
37, that's not that poor. That's not so bad in all honesty. I mean, so VO2 Max is a funny thing because it won't do it for paddling. That's something I wish it had, because the same with performance condition. If you go for a run, it tells you if you need more rest or like how you can anticipate that run's gonna feel. I want it to do that for paddling. Kind of a way to hack that and get around it is to log your paddles as runs, because it'll start out and it'll beep and it'll tell you your performance condition and potentially your VO2 max. But it's not very accurate. And that's the other thing. I have my Garmin connected to a Training Peaks account, because Training Peaks takes your pace and your heart rate and your previous, I think, 2 weeks of training into consideration to determine your current fitness level, your current fatigue level, and a bunch of other things. Hopefully Paddle Ninja is going to do something like that soon if I can get some spare time. But right now it's like a premium service through Training Peaks that it does that. And I find that it grossly underestimates how difficult stand-up paddling is. It's not so bad in the outrigger canoe, but if you were to strive to meet some of it recommends that you can increase your fitness by, I think, 5 points, and it describes how they determine those points. Again, it's based on your last 2 weeks of training and then the month of training, your load, your aerobic capacity, fitness, and all of that base. And if you were to try to increase 5 points a week on stand-up paddling, like on a stand-up paddleboard, you will get so overtrained. Like, it's not even funny. So it's really hard. And a lot of people too will look at like running training plans and running things. Well, it's really interesting to learn a lot from running coaches and training plans developed for running and even cycling. It's just, it's not the load is not the same. Stand-up paddling is very, very full body intensive. Like, your legs are balancing, your legs are driving the board forward, your arms are paddling, your core is engaged, more so than running and even trail running. So Jody, you're right. Like, Garmin's like, poor. You're like, no, come try stand-up paddling. They have the stand-up paddle feature, but it's just not. I think they're trying. I think they're probably waiting to see if this sport like hangs around, stands the test of time before they spend too much developing it. But I think it'll be around. And even if not, like, there's outrigger and marathon canoe, which uses the same algorithms for stroke rate. So I think they should keep it.
Hi. I asked our SUP club for some questions because we're big fans of yours. The most sensible question I got was, how do you go about setting your training schedule when you've got sort of multiple races and multiple crafts? How do you manage to get it all in?
Oh, yeah. No, it's hard. I love that you're here to ask your questions in person, so I won't have to flip over to my email and find them. So please ask all of them. To train for mainly OC1 and stand-up paddling, I find that the stand-up paddleboard is hard to keep your heart rate low and in the right zone and find that really amazing flow where the craft glides in between strokes. So when I need to fill in my aerobic base mileage and really develop my aerobic capacity, I'm often defaulting to the outrigger canoe. It's gonna depend though on what events are the most important to me that year. You have to pick. Like, at the end of what's the quote? If you chase all the rabbits, you catch none. You absolutely have to pick your number one A priority thing and know whether it's going to be outrigger or stand up. And so that way, like, if you do get time crunched in a certain week, you can default to the thing that is more important to you that year. So originally this year, I started out training in the OC1 thinking that there was gonna be a Molo Solo, thinking there was gonna be a World Va'a, thinking there was gonna be a lot of stuff. And now at the last minute, none of that is happening. And all of a sudden, all there is on my calendar is the Stand-Up Paddle World Championships in Hungary. And I'm like, oh crap, I have like 12 weeks to go. And this week is the first week that I hopped on stand-up, and it feels awful. Like, it's so heavy. It's such a high resistance craft. It's insane. When I want to do really high intensity pieces, like intervals, get my heart rate up, like that heavy breathing, develop a lot of sport specific strength. So if you got somewhere where it's like, I need to get my heart rate up, but sometimes maybe you struggle to get your heart rate into those zones, hop on the stand-up. That'll do it, because it's heavy. It's almost like the high resistance training. So even when I have an outrigger event, I will throw in like maybe 2 to 4 stand-up sessions a week, because when I get back in the outrigger canoe, it feels like I'm paddling an airplane through the clouds. I'm just floating. It feels magical. Just kind of recalibrating your brain in that way can be really beneficial. I think your email had mentioned also like gym workouts and like cross training and stuff like that as well. Throughout the entire year, I periodize my training, and the body adapts best to big blocks of a similar type of stimulus. So if a lot of people, for like general fitness, like a dabbling of everything throughout the week, so they might do like sprints on Monday, the gym, and an easy paddle on Wednesday, like a long paddle on Saturdays or something like that. I tend to block my things in like I said, big chunks of just monotonous training, because the body responds well and can maintain. Then I maintain it later. So this winter, I did a big block in the gym. It was frigid here. I didn't want to get on the water anyway. So I did really, really heavy lifting in the gym and a little bit of aerobic running. I did that for like 8 weeks straight, right? And then when that was over, I did strength endurance, which takes the max strength from the gym. So everybody in the winter, if you're not able to get on the water, should really aim to do at least a 6-week block of maximum strength where you're lifting heavy-ish, like heavy for you, not to failure. Lifting to failure would mean elicit a hypertrophy response, which means your muscle fiber diameters would be growing in size and you'd bulk up, which as paddlers we don't want, because it would make us weigh more on our boards. We want to try within reason to kind of keep our weight down, our power to weight ratio high. But you get strong in the gym in the winter, and then as it starts warming up, you shift to strength endurance, where instead of lifting heavy, you lift a really light weight, something around like 30 to 40% of your maximum, your 1 rep maximum, in those same moves that you were doing heavy lifting in. And you do repetitive motions for 3 to 4 minutes. It's miserable. And you do that for 6 weeks while the weather's kind of starting to warm up in the spring and you're able to get on the water more. If you start building up your aerobic base mileage at the same time, it's going to help flush the system and it's going to help you recover. It's going to oxygenate your body and kind of make you recover faster from those strength endurance workouts. So I'm never trying to fit all of the workouts in 1 week per se. Like, so max strength is over, strength endurance is over, and then I, planned a crazy paddle from my house to Cape Hatteras to make sure that I could get the most paddling aerobic base in the spring, because I knew the body responds well again to just a big mono block, like a single stimulus. So I was strong from the gym, and so that way my body didn't break down out there on the water, but I was able to build my aerobic capacity while I was out there. When I got back, I took a little break and I added the stand-up paddleboard back in and started doing some higher intensity pieces. So, and now I'll lift heavy like once every 2 weeks and maybe do a strength endurance workout once every 2 to 3 weeks as well. So I'm in the gym once a week, but I just wait for a day that it's like throwing down outside, like crazy rain, crazy storms. And all I have to do, now that my body is adapted to a big block of that stimulus, I have it. I only need to remind it every week or two, right? So now it's not like I have to be in there. I'm not training that stimulus year round. I did one big block to really optimize it. And then all I have to do after that is remind my body, oh, yep, we still need that. Oh, yeah, you still have to pick heavy things up. Oh, yeah, you still need to be able to lift that like for 3 minutes straight at a relatively high weight. So I think if you train year round, that's the best way to go about it. If you follow the same kind of protocol that like the general fitness programs, again, like I said, they maybe have you lift heavy on Monday, do intervals on Tuesday, and you kind of have a little bit of everything, this potpourri of training, you'll improve anywhere from, based on how often you train, you'll improve from like 2 to 4 years. You'll definitely get better, but you will reach a plateau. So it depends on your long-term goals as well. Those training plans are amazing to feel great and be fit and live a healthy lifestyle, the potpourri plans. But if you had, say, a goal 4 years from now, like if you were going to train for like a world championship or an Olympic event, you would definitely want to do bigger blocks and zoom out and look at that training on a more macro level from like 4 years or more.
Ooh, and even better, that wasn't my question, but I'm going to claim it.
Okay. Wait, you said, how do you fit it all in 1 week?
The email question wasn't mine. So,
Oh.
yeah. My email was, it's late in the UK, I'll be in my pajamas, sorry.
Oh, that's funny. Now I got to go find that email.
I'll claim it though, it was a good question.
Man.
Thank you.
No worries. Yeah, Laura said, how much time do you spend training off the water, gym, land, exercise? What kind of off training do you think is most beneficial? And how do you balance on and off water training? I think I pretty much answered that though, right? Except for what kind of off water training is most beneficial. Goodness, that's hard. I would say anything that you're motivated to do for starters, because I hate running. Like there's no tomorrow. I know it's really good for me. And when I have the discipline to do it, I paddle better, but God, I hate it. So that's horrible. Hate's a strong word, but I don't like running very much. So, trail running, however, I think is good for stand-up paddlers. There's a lot of core activation when you're doing like the hills and coming around the corners. And mountain biking is actually a very, very good cross-training activity because you do, for like downwind and stuff like that, it trains the body well for lactate clearing because you get sometimes you're going uphill and it's very, very high intensity. And then after that, you usually get like a downhill where your body can flush any waste products and you get to recover before you go uphill again. And anything too that just... I like some cross-training activities that are a little more neurologically demanding. Mountain biking, if you're going down the hills, you kind of have to be, oh, there's a rock, oh, there's a log, and it's all coming at you really, really fast. Whereas in stand-up and even jogging, it's like a turtle sport. Everything's coming at you really slow, and I love my turtle sports, but it helps to activate the brain in that way to do some really quicker, more reactive, like more neuroreactive sports for cross training occasionally. The more different it can be from paddling, almost the better. You want to give that area of your brain a break, and you want to give those muscles a break as well. I think a lot of people get really hung up with, oh, I'm paddling, I have to pull. I'm going to go to the gym and I'm going to do like rows and bench press. You do these muscles all the time when you're paddling. Do something else when you go to the gym. Develop better body balance would definitely be my recommendation there. Wayne asked a question in the comments. He said... He's asking about seat position and leg drive for OC1 versus OC6. And yes, in an OC6, those of you who don't paddle OC6 and OC1 or have not, you're higher in the water in the OC6. The OC1, you're closer to the water. So a lot of people actually have two different paddles. They have a longer one for OC6 and a shorter one for OC1. So he feels like he's missing something in the OC1 in terms of leg drive. It's funny, when I'm in an OC6, I'm not using like my legs at all. A lot of people really want their feet on the braces. A lot of the OC6 boats come with the braces, and my feet are usually tucked and kind of under me, and or like I just kind of cross them and sit them on the floor in front of me, but I'm not driving a lot through the feet. I've noticed in some OC6 teams, the timing of the boat kind of gets off. So when you paddle and other people don't paddle exactly with the same rhythm and the exact same kind of body rhythm, the boat has a tendency to have that really like weird jerky feeling instead of like a smooth it's like a smooth millipede, maybe, is what I'm going for. A lot of times it's because people are trying to push through their feet. And it's easy enough to get the OC6 timing from the navel up, from your waist up, because you're looking at the other people in the boat and you can almost like mirror that. But you can't see each other's feet. And so that can get challenging and really throw off a boat. I'm not ever really pushing through my feet per se. I'm pushing through my butt. So if you're like, my hips and like where I'm seated is where I have the strongest, most connection to the boat, right? Like that's the biggest surface area I have on the boat. My feet will be in contact with the bottom of the OC6, or in the OC1, they are there. And in downwind, I definitely push hard against and like extend to kind of almost like stand up and adjust my body position, either front or rear of the center balance point, to either drop into a wave or lean back so I don't pearl the nose. It's not the cat butt on the carpet necessarily analogy, but it kind of is, because it's an opening of the hip joint before the blade leaves the water. So in paddling, everything you do, we're trying to maximize our efficiency. So every movement you take should be a movement that is propelling the boat forward. You don't need any motion in the up and down plane. You don't need any motion in the side to side plane. The only plane you want to move in is front, back. If you're like lifting to put the blade in the water and your head's like coming up and down, that's momentum and that's energy, that's calories burnt, that's lost in the wrong plane of momentum. Every muscle that you're firing needs to be forward, back, forward, back. And so when I plant the blade, it's strong and it's connected. My musculature is stiff and holding on, because when you get a good catch, feels like you put your blade in cement, very, very heavy. I'm then untwisting my thoracic spine, squeezing through my abdominals and my lower core, pulling with the bottom lat, pushing with the top lat, again, as I untwist thoracic spine. And all of that, as I tighten my core, is driving my hips forward while the blade is still in the water. So if like I'm sitting like this, as my blade goes in the water, I drive with my top part of my body, but then I'm opening my hip joint as I drive the paddle back, or I drive my hips past the paddle each stroke. The feet, they're not dangling there. They're strong, they're activated, and they're engaged, just like they would be in a back squat or something. Like they're connected to the boat, to the unit, but they're not making any motion independently. Like they're not contributing anything on their own. Does that make sense, Wayne?
Yeah, I think it makes sense. I think, like I said, I feel like I'm getting a lot more work in the OC6 in my legs and my glutes. It feels like I'm doing, like 10,000 deadlifts when I'm on OC6, where it's much more subtle than an OC1.
Okay.
You made comment about kind of bobbing the boat and, kind of more up and down motion. I think that's probably true in my case, right? You're given the kind of stance that you're in, that maybe you're pushing, down through the floor on an OC6, right?
Yeah, I found in the gorge, in the downwind race, when I needed to put down, we had one moment where our steerswoman was screaming bloody murder. Like if we didn't catch the bump we were on, we were gonna spin out and eat it. And like she made it very clear that we had to go. And I'll never forget, like I slid off of my seat onto my knees so that I could like just brace out against the boat and really drive with my core and open that hip joint into the forward stroke. Does that make sense about the hip joint opening? Because I feel that more than, because it's hip drive, and that in theory, I mean, that's leg drive. But if your blade's out of the water and then you lift up, so if you take your blade out of the water and then you open the hip joint to like place the blade back in the water, that's energy that could have been very efficient forward momentum that is now wasted. You're wasting that energy to open up the hip joint and place the blade in the water instead of using every motion that your body goes through to propel you forward. So it's more hip drive than leg drive.
Okay. Do you to kind of that hip drive kind of comment, sometimes I kind of envision doing like a kettlebell swing.
Yes.
Similar kind of thing there.
Very similar.
Yeah.
So I find if you're in slower craft, so like in slower races, so if you're really into longer endurance racing in stand-up, OC6 or OC1, you can do some kettlebell swings occasionally, toes to bar, which are really hard, the rhythm kind, the kipping kind. Have you seen the CrossFit athletes do those? Wow, I'm like in awe. I suck at those, and I want to do those that good, but I can't yet. But the rhythm for the toes to bar, to do them unbroken, that is oh my God, the brain-body connection, like the neurological aspect of that exercise alone, that's one to add into the rotation. But adding them at the right time, right? So after a maximum strength phase, maybe in the winter, if you are an athlete who's not doing the super long endurance-y stuff and you're doing more middle or short distance sprint racing, then there's another type of strength workout block that you want to add into your training called the max power phase. And max power is where you're moving a heavy-ish weight, maybe around 70% of your 1 rep maximum. So not as heavy as your max strength phase, not as light as your strength endurance phase, but you want to move the weight AFAFP as fast as freaking possible. So think anything plyometric. So if you were going to do push-ups that time of year, instead of push-ups, you would do explosive push-ups and try to clap. Like push yourself off the ground, clap, and then land. So anything explosive. Kettlebell swings would fall into that time of year. The toes to bar, the kipping explosive toes to bar. And then another one that's really good for strengthening that hip joint, cleans. So with a barbell, so the bar's down low and you explode opening the hip joint. You don't want to use your arms to do a clean and a jerk. The clean portion of the clean and jerk, or you're generating all of your energy by opening the hip joint. And when you explosively open that hip joint, it moves the weight and you catch it up on your shoulders. That's another really neurologically activating movement that is fantastic to really, in the outside of paddling, build that timing of how to drive with the hips, how to maneuver the body, how to move weight, how to propel a mass, in this case your body plus your craft. In the gym, your barbell, your kettlebell, your whatever, but it crosses over. It's training you how to, instead of muscling through it with your arms, how can you open the hip joint and actually generate a ton of forward momentum? Because those are big muscles in the quads and in the glutes and the psoas and the lower abdominals. All of that area in your hip joint, those are really large, powerful muscles. Much more powerful than what we have up here, right? So if you can initiate your paddle stroke with the small muscles, get your catch, kind of hold on, but then with those big muscles of the hip joint, boom, open that up and apply a lot of power, you're really gonna find some fancy fun magic in your paddle stroke. So hip drive more than foot drive. Think of your hips, not your feet.
All right.
So
thank you. I'm gonna have to work on that one too.
yeah, it'll be. I mean, keep the feet planted and secure and solid, but don't think about driving through them. It's not that you won't inadvertently apply some pressure through them. Just don't think about it. Other questions?
Yeah, this is Mona. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Hey.
Hey, hi. I had a question about what you said about the huge big block of low intensity training you did at the beginning of your year. Because I train with Larry Kane, and he does, he works in the low intensity every week, and we also have periodized training when we start with more low intensity and build in more high intensity. But I think what you said is that you did a huge block of low intensity training.
I did a very large block.
And your body set to that. So this is a new idea to me, like to do a huge block, because our long low intensities are like 70 minutes, but it sounds like you went way longer than 70 minutes.
I went about 9 hours a day for 7 days.
At low intensity for that whole time.
Yeah, so heart rate between like 110 and like 120, 130. So I would like kind of ramp it up and ramp it down and ramp it up, or I would like encounter challenges along the way. I kind of kept it really low key in the beginning, with the current just kind of cruising. I would speed up usually at the end of the day because I wanted to get to camp.
Yeah.
So I'd usually start like super chill, like digesting my breakfast, maybe like 115 beats per minute. And then once my breakfast was digested, like ramp it up and do like maybe like 2 or 3 hours of like low level aerobic, break for lunch, digest and paddle some more. And then like as the sun would kind of start setting, I would just inadvertently be like, I'm over this. I'm done. Right. I'm going to paddle really hard now. Like not hard, but on YouTube, I posted recently that I did, before I left for my camping paddle trip, I did a lactate test to determine my aerobic threshold without question. I didn't want to be like, oh, I think my aerobic threshold is this, like the old 180 minus my age, plus or minus some other metrics based on your current level of fitness and health metrics. I wanted to know like the blood lactate level in my body at each heart rate stage so that I knew what I was doing out there. Because once you come out of that aerobic, like that purely aerobic threshold, it's not a bad thing, right? Like it's just my body is naturally fast twitch and wants to generate and use lactate to create pyruvate to make fuel, and my body doesn't want to use oxygen and burn fat. It doesn't want to do that. Like genetically, that's something I'm fighting, right? So if I go out just a little too hard, my body instantly is like, oh, we're exercising. Here, flood the blood with all this lactate. We'll use that as energy. Yum, yum, yum. And so I've been really training it hard to start out slower and say, no lactate for you. You have to use oxygen and you have to burn fat as oxidative fuel. And so I had to know that exact number where around a blood lactate level of 2.5. Some white paper studies suggest maybe around 3. It is kind of dependent on the individual and their genetics, but I knew in that range that I would be purely aerobic. At those levels also, the blood lactate is one thing, but more importantly, is honestly the activation of the parasympathetic versus the sympathetic system. So your sympathetic system's your fight and flight. So whenever you do a workout that's maybe a little shorter, or even have the wrong mindset in an easy workout, you could be inadvertently activating your sympathetic system. And when that happens, it releases more cortisol, and you don't get that kind of stimulus. You don't get the message. Your body doesn't get the message to build new capillaries. If I came out of my aerobic zone as I tested, or if I had the wrong mindset during the whole paddle, I would have screwed it up. So when your parasympathetic system, your rest and digest system, is activated when you're paddling, it is sending your body the signal that it's okay, it's relaxed, it's not in danger, everything's fine, and it feels safe to build new capillaries and build new mitochondria. So I'm hoping that I have a lot of those now. There are other studies that indicate that anything over 3 hours can be counterproductive. That's very, very clear in the literature. So, but they're looking at it from the point of like metabolic breakdown, where maybe fuel. So if you're not eating enough, anything over 3 hours. So that I'm trying to find out how to like phrase this, because correlation isn't causation. So I read all the studies, and it's like, oh, anything over 3 hours, you might as well, if you're going to train for an endurance event, stop. Anything over 3 hours is not beneficial. It breaks down the body too much. In leading up to the big block of monostructural training, I was very, very sure to build up like my aerobic capacity for many hours a day. Leading up to that, I was very, very strict with my strength balance to make sure that like every muscle in my body, I didn't want any tweaks. I didn't want to end the day feeling more broken than when I started. If that happened, it would have been a failed mission. So with that in mind, heart rate 110 to usually like 130, 140 max, unless there was downwind challenge, which I love downwind, so I kind of just let myself do whatever in the downwind. And then there was a small section of whitewater for like about an hour, and navigating the rapids, my heart rate was like ping. So outside of downwinding and navigating rapids, though, yes, completely aerobic and striving to end the day feeling as good as when I started it. And the key to that was honestly hoovering food. Like I calculated, so Garmin spits out an estimate of how many calories you burn in a day. And so leading up to that, leaving, I did a couple days where I did like a 4-hour block in the morning and a 4-hour block in the evening. And I checked my Garmin to see what it said I burned. And then I built my meal plan around that. So I was supposed to eat between 4,000 and 5,000 calories a day. Newsflash, I couldn't do it. There was no way. Like I couldn't. I think I got occasionally close to 4,000. I had leftover food. I just could not stomach that much food. I ate until I couldn't eat anymore, but I never felt broken down, and I never felt tired. And I slept for 8 hours, 9 hours a night. Like it wasn't, I slept well, I ate well, and those are the two keys to recovery. And I kept my parasympathetic system activated the entire time I paddled. I don't want to give away too much, because it's kind of like when I do the big YouTube movie of the trip, that's kind of the point, is by shifting your mindset from, oh, each day is a chore or a task or something, if you treated it as kind of just an extremely enjoyable endeavor, like every moment you just really kept your parasympathetic system active, like this is fun, this is play, I'm so happy. Every stroke is building me up and making me a better human, and just really loving and valuing each second of each day. If you had like this crazy positive mindset, could you finish each day without feeling broken and feeling exhausted? And could you finish 7 days of that and be better for it, instead of kind of finishing 7 days and being busted? And I think you can. Mission success, more or less. So I hope that answered somewhat the question.
Hey, April, I have a non-training question. What do you use for navigation when you're out in the open ocean and you don't have landmarks, or do you just try to keep landmarks? But what do you use for navigation?
The Garmin 64 ST. I put the GPS coordinates of where I want to go, and it makes a little purple line, and I keep my little arrow on the purple line. However, I'm currently reading How to Read Water, and it's talking about it does go in depth about the Polynesians and how they can get from like island to island with nothing but the stars. So that's my goal, but right now, Garmin. But one day I will get from one island to a island 100 miles away with nothing but the waves and the stars, and our internal sense of magnetic north. Humans have that. Did you know that? We just don't use it. I found that out recently, and I'm like, darn, I wish I'm gonna train that one up. That's gonna be fun.
As long as that magnetic north stays the same.
I know. Are we due for a pole shift? I think we're about 60,000 years overdue for a magnetic pole reversal.
I have a non-technical question as well. So we were all due to go to the Yukon last August, and it's been postponed till next year.
Yep.
So, like, what was your highlights? What are the best things to look out for? Lowlights, bears? Tell me more.
So yeah, I was registered for the same race, and it's postponed. So Jen is the one who did the Yukon River Quest. So she's done the 444, and she said Lake LaBerge. It's like on the first day. Like that's the thing, right? Just be prepared for that to be an absolute crap show. And then other than that, if you have like the bear canisters and put your food in that, I think you're golden in terms of wildlife. There's actually a really cool woman. I just found her. She did the entire Yukon, like the 2,000 miles source to sea. And she's also done the entire Mississippi and the entire Missouri River here in the States, all 100% solo. She's an older woman, and she doesn't, like, no recognition, no interest in being known. She's got a cute little blog on, like, Blogspot, and she's done all these, like, super badass things all by herself. If you Google woman paddling Yukon River source to sea.
Did she do the Ganges as well? I think I know.
I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know if she did the Ganges, but I know she did like 3 main ones here in the North America. And she goes really in depth about like the bears and the wildlife. And so I found her blog to be very handy in preparing for Yukon. Jen and I we couldn't guarantee. I have events next year that I couldn't defer my entry, so we've just withdrawn from the race. And so we're going to re-enter at a later date if if we don't just paddle at source to sea by ourselves outside of the race.
Yeah, we're not actually doing the race. Stuart from Yukon Quest has given us sort of a guided tour, so we're doing quite a leisurely sort of, I think 10 days over 700k or something. So
that'll be fun.
Yeah.
Dude,
less pressure.
Eat more. Yeah, eat more than you think you need.
Yeah,
that's my eat food. Bring all the food, eat all the food. For my 7 days, which I mean, I did it very leisurely. I didn't do it like, I wasn't like hucking, like I said. I had like a little evening ritual with my big homemade dehydrated chili, and then I bought those Noon the Rest magnesium tabs, and I'd pour those in warm water. So I'd make enough water to make my dinner, and then I had a little left over for like a warm sleepy time drink. Dude, it would knock me right out if 70 miles of paddling didn't. But it was kind of nice to just have this warm, soothing beverage in the evenings. And so I think little creature comforts like that, within reason, can really make or break a long distance thing like that. So again, it's all about mindset. So just the more positively you can think about the whole thing, the bigger the benefit that you'll get from it.
April, I have a question for you.
Yay!
So how do you fuel for races? Like, do you base it off of time? So when you just maybe, like if it's an hour race, you're just, okay, it's just water, right? Mm-hmm. Maybe some electrolytes. But where's the point where then you start thinking about more fuel, calories? Is it like a 2.5, 3 hour race? Like how do you base that?
For me, it's at about like that on SUP, a 6 mile mark. So I always, if it's over 3 miles, I'm gonna bring water no matter what. I don't know, like even if I don't drink it, I'm bringing it, because it's better to have and not need than to need and not have. It doesn't have to be a lot, but the second you feel dehydrated, like, the saying, it's too late. So your blood viscosity increases when you're dehydrated, and that's essentially, if you think about your car filled with gas, it's as if your gas gummed up, and all of a sudden things aren't moving through the pipes. So when you get dehydrated and your blood viscosity increases, everything crawls, everything's slowed down. So there's never any reason to go without water, especially when it's hot out, because at the minimum you want your blood concentration to be at a sufficient level to keep things flowing speedily and comfortably. It depends on, yes, the length of the whole race, the heat, the intensity, like what kind of conditions you've got, and the time of the race starts. So for me, an afternoon race, I don't need as much fuel because I have all morning to like shovel food in my face. But an early morning race, you are depleted. I mean, you can load up from the night before, but it's not the same as like consistently snacking all day leading up to an afternoon race. You're still gonna have an empty stomach the morning of an early morning race. I've gone to the extent to set an alarm in the past where 4 hours before my race, I'll just set like a little buzzer alarm and shovel like 2 Cliff Bars in my mouth and go back to sleep. And just literally, I've split rooms with people before races, and they're trying to sleep, getting ready for this race, and all this like beep 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 beep, and you just hear like, and they're like it's a quiet room, and it's just April. Like, really? I'm like, yeah, really. Sorry. But I've gone that far to make sure that my glycogen stores are topped off and I've got sufficient fuel for when the race starts. Last year, I really worked on my aerobic capacity and my ability to utilize more fat as fuel, but the body still, even in a fat adapted state, even if you've maximized your fat burning capabilities aerobically, you will still perform better. Like all athletes that ate carbs within like the week of their event increased their performance. The ones that became fat adapted and then ate carbs did better than the ones that ate carbs the whole time, and better than the ones who only ate fats and did carb reduce the whole time as well. So it behooves you to be able to utilize both substrates as fuel, right? It is essentially what the science kind of points to. On the course, so like I'll get up and eat a pretty solid breakfast, but I don't want to eat anything that's going to cause a major blood sugar spike, right? So nothing super high glycemic longish before the race, so the morning, because you don't want to spike and crash. You want to wake up and eat things that are pretty low carb. Think like egg whites, and I do like that Ezekiel bread toast sometimes. Spinach is good, or like big spinach egg white frittata. Veggies, some nut butters, fats and proteins. Not too much protein because that'll sit heavy in the gut. And not too much fat because that'll sit heavy in the gut too. But think of like the lightest proteins and fats you could eat, just or very low glycemic carbs. All of that just for a nice stable blood sugar profile throughout that morning. And as you're getting closer to the race, there's a drink called Vitargo. It's a drink mix, and it doesn't cause the big spike. It's a really low glycemic waxy maize carb, and that one's really good. So I'll start sipping that before the race. I'll even kind of sip that the night before while I'm going to bed. So I'll start sipping that leading up to the race, and then before the race, if it's a really short race, I'll do some high glycemic carbs for that like big burst of energy, and you just, it gives you that spike and you burn through it. You use it, no harm, no foul. If it's a longer race, like middle distance, I'll do some moderately fast burning, so like medium burning carbohydrates, mango, certain berries and stuff like that. They're just kind of a medium burn, and I'll put some calorie drink in my Camelback to give me some sustained energy. If the race is gonna be over an hour and a half, I'll mix my fast and my slow burning carbs like Vitargo and Tailwind. It's kind of a slower and a medium to fast carb, so it's got a blend of everything, and I'll sip that like every 15 minutes throughout the race. And then I always, if it's over an hour and a half, those god-awful things at the gas station, the 5-hour energies, oh yeah, yuck. Be ready for the tummy ache if you don't usually do those. I'm not advocating this for health, but if you want to win a race, you shove that like in the little front pocket of your Camelback, and like 30 minutes to the end, so you get, an hour and a half or a 2-hour race. If it's an hour and a half, at an hour in, you just drink it. And if it's a 2-hour race, at an hour and a half, open it, drink it. Dude, like within 2 miles of the finish, you're going to be like Popeyes, like doo-doo-doo-doo-doo. And you will be ready to sprint to the finish. And then you can just feel yucky later. I like, for something that you're going to see conditions of all kinds, because you might get hit with like against the tide or against some wind, and in those scenarios you don't want to move backwards, right? So you might blow out of an aerobic zone. You might not be paddling in the zone you want to paddle in. You might have to go a lot harder than you want to. If you round a bend and you're just hitting this stiff headwind, you're gonna you're going to burn maybe too much fuel, like that you didn't plan for. In cases like that, where you're going to encounter a lot of different conditions, I love to keep my calorie beverage, my electrolyte beverage, and my plain water separate. So I always keep those three things separate on anything longer than like 3 hours or near 3 hours. And especially in the ultra distant stuff, because your body's going to tell you what you need, right? Like if you start feeling tired, like you're running out of energy, you need calories, drink calories. If you start, like you feel it like the beginning, your fingers start curling and you don't think they're going to uncurl, you need electrolytes. You need them like now. So if you don't feel either of those things, if you're feeling like your energy is great and everything's firing on all cylinders, just drink plain water to keep the blood viscosity on par, because you're sweating that stuff out. So just keep drinking water and keeping the fluids high in the system. You never want to overhydrate, because the risk of hyponatremia is just as bad, if not worse. It's really horrible, than becoming dehydrated as well. And that's another reason that it's good to have those electrolytes too. If you did find yourself like, oh, I paddled this whole race and all I drank was water, you might have a couple of sips of electrolytes to try to keep that salt water balance optimal. Because the electrolytes those are so important, because your brain and your body, that's how they're communicating, right? Like we're little electric beings. Our brains send out these electric signals through our neurons to our muscles to fire. If we don't have the ions with that, positive and negative charge, our brain can't send those signals for our muscles to fire. So even if we started running low on electrolytes, your muscles would start firing more slowly. And you might, if you're newer to that kind of stimulus, you might just think you're slowing down and getting tired and drink more calories or eat some calories. And that can cover it up for like a minute. But if the real problem is low salts, low electrolytes, then your body will continue to function suboptimally, not send the maximum signal. You might also experience that as a loss of power in your stroke. So you'd be thinking, oh gee, my muscles are getting tired, my speed is slowing down, or not just cadence, but the amount of power I can apply per stroke is slowing down. It might not be you, it might just be your brain's ability to communicate what it wants to your muscles. So take a little sip of electrolytes and see if that power comes back. If your cadence is slowing down, have a little carbohydrate. If that doesn't bring your cadence back, have a little electrolyte. It could be that connection again. With the proper fuel and the proper training, like you can fix it all. The body will tell you what it needs. You just have to listen. I'm going to look at the email real quick and see who else asked questions. Navigation. Oh, this is just Jody's.
Yeah, the only one that I'd probably add on that, April, would be, you can disregard the other ones unless you wanted to answer them. But
okay.
Do you have any clinics planned in the near future? Because I've missed your one in Florida.
I do. I am going on a big Northeast tour in August. I will be at the Ohio River Paddle Fest the first weekend of August, the Cayuga Sup Cup, which now includes Outrigger, the second weekend of August, and I will be in Philadelphia and surrounding areas the following weekend. So weekends 1, 2, and 3 of August, I'll be in the Northeast.
A little one, April. How many grams of protein per pound do you think a woman needs? I'm an older woman, but in general.
That's a really challenging question, because
it is.
I find it to be, for me, different times of year. When I'm doing a big gym block, I need more protein. And if I need to recover more, I need more protein. If I need more energy, then I need more carbohydrate. At all times, I know that my body needs plenty of fats because I like to try to maintain like a reasonable amount of fat burning in my aerobic work. I do maybe like 2 or 3 fasted paddles in a week, usually 2, not often 3. But excess dietary fat in women can mess with our hormones. So it kind of ends up leaving you where the optimal diet for women has more carbohydrate than well, I mean, most diets do have more carbohydrate than fat and protein. But again, that's going to depend on your activity level. If your job is sedentary and other things are sedentary, then you need to bring the carbs down and probably do even more protein. So that can be really hard. The number offhand, I don't know. Is it like 30 grams? I have to open the last paddling physiology. Protein intake for athletes. Okay. I'm currently, so when I was doing my maximum strength phase, I was eating 211 grams of protein.
Wow.
Per day. And that was 30% of my daily calories. But then again, so I preface that with I'm working out like 7 to 12 times a week. So that it's very different. The recovery I need is different. So the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics article says anywhere from 5 to 5.5 ounces or 141 to 155 grams of lean protein for men and women 51 years and older. Other people, so yeah, 0.6 to 0.8 grams per pound of weight. There's so many different ways to calculate it. I don't remember the grams per pound, but I look at it more as a percentage of daily calories. And again, the higher end when you really need recovery. So I like to think of it from the point of view of pair your food with your training. So if I'm going to do a heavy strength session or an intense interval session or a very long, like from the camping paddle adventure, it's really long and I need a decent bit of protein to recover for the next day. So anybody doing multi-day stage racing, where usually for a one-day race, you only consume carbohydrates during the race because it helps you, and that's a quick, easily digestible fuel. In multi-day races, they make things like Hammer Perpetuum and other drink mixes that have a little bit of protein built into the mix. And you're not using that for fuel necessarily the day of. The reason that's important is because it's already helping to repair your body for the next day's effort. If you're going to do a heavy weight session or an intense interval session or a multi-day race, you would want to pair more protein on that day. So it's not like, hey, eat this many grams of protein per body weight per day, right? I think get away from that overly structured way of thinking and say, okay, studies suggest anywhere from like 0.6 to 2 grams per pound of body weight per day. They suggest that, and maybe that's my range, right? So on a day where I do a recovery session or I'm doing recovery paddles, maybe I don't need as much protein to recover unless I'm recovering from the day prior. If I'm doing a heavy session, I need more carbohydrate and more protein and less fat. If I'm having a pretty sedentary day, maybe I eat just more fat, but moderate amounts of protein and lower carbohydrates. Maybe on a day with kind of like moderate intensity levels, I eat a more balanced diet. I think that a lot of us get into trouble, and I know I have many a time when it comes to diet, is eating like, oh, I do a 50, 30, 20, carb, protein, fat. And I do that every day. But I don't work out the exact same way every day. So why does my nutrition need to be the exact same way every day? I don't think it should be. Aim for higher gram per pound body weight on more intense days. And on the other days, just be forgiving and lenient with yourself if you don't consume like all the protein you need. If the next day you're feeling a lot of muscle soreness, or you get DOMS, the delayed onset muscle soreness, 48 hours later, if you're feeling that way, keep a really, really detailed training journal. That I would attribute everything I've figured out to my very, very detailed training journal. When I get off the water and when I'm done with the day, I kind of write what I've eaten, I write what I've felt, I write what I've done. I write when I'm sore, and if I'm incredibly sore, I can look back and say, oh, what did I eat? Did I eat enough calories to support my activity level for starters? Because if I didn't, I'm going to feel really sore. Did I eat the wrong ratio of macronutrients? And you can play with that and kind of determine what optimizes your energy levels and what optimizes your recovery. But again, I wouldn't say this amount of protein like forever and ever. So I was doing 211 grams of protein at 30% of my calories back in February, when I was lifting heavy it was 4 times a week. I was doing Monday, Tuesday, rest Wednesday, and then Thursday, Friday. And these lifts were at 91% of my 1 rep max. So like really, really muscular fatiguing. I needed a lot of protein because that also, I wanted that muscle protein synthesis that time of year. Right now, I'm not eating anywhere near that amount of protein. I'm not even tracking how much protein I'm eating right now because I'm putting in 70 to 80 mile weeks, and I'm eating mostly carbohydrates right now. And I'm not doing anything that's really breaking down my muscles where I'd want to like break it down and rebuild it. So I don't need as much protein right now. But what I do need is plenty of carbohydrates to fuel it, and plenty of healthy, and a small amount of healthy fat and protein for the recovery. And always enough fats, because that's what your brain uses. So our brains really, really need the fats. So don't eat too much dietary fat as a woman, but always enough so that your brain feels super happy. I know, that wasn't a number answer. There I go, giving a long answer again.
Yeah, but that was a very useful answer. Thank you.
Okay, I'm glad. Nutrient timing would be what I would Google to learn more about that subject. And it goes beyond just the day, right? Like, so beyond just, hey, I did a heavy lift today, more of my macronutrient percentage is gonna come from protein today, but hey, I just did this workout, I'm gonna have protein right now. Or I just got off the water, I'm gonna consume my carbohydrate right now. Versus I'm gonna eat a carton of carbohydrate ice cream before bed. If I want the ice cream, I should have that right when I get off the water, so that my body actually, especially after a higher intensity or a really taxing session where you're not training your aerobic system, a really fun fact is after a high intensity session, your body releases cortisol, right? You did something stressful, so it dumps cortisol, the stress hormone, into your body. Do you know what blocks and counteracts cortisol? It's insulin. Do you know we get a big, big insulin spike after we eat a high glycemic index food? So if you want to balance that cortisol, that stress reaction from a heavy, hard workout, you actually should totally eat a high glycemic insulin spiking carbohydrate. Not any other time of the day. You don't want that insulin spike and then it's just circulating around in your blood like la la la, I have nothing to do. But if you have a ton of cortisol in your system, then the insulin has a job to do. It feels useful, it feels needed. And the insulin's then happy to do its job, and it balances out the cortisol, and then it's okay, right? So you're getting the best of both worlds. You don't need to avoid, people have kind of demonized these high glycemic carbs, but then now I'm starting to see a lot of people, women particularly, suffering from REDS, like relative energy deficiency in sport, aerobic deficiency syndrome, and other disorders that are related to high cortisol levels, the stress hormone, HPA axis syndrome, with adrenal fatigue, thyroid problems. All of that's related to high cortisol. Meanwhile, everybody's running around avoiding high glycemic carbs like they're gonna, make you blow up and like the plague, and they're not bad. Food isn't good or bad. It can just be poorly timed. So if you're gonna eat your high glycemic carb, pair it when there's cortisol. Inadvertently, that's why when you feel triggered by an extremely stressful situation, my mother just left. I would know. She visited for a week. And all of a sudden you're reaching for that high glycemic ice cream because you're like, gee, I have a lot of cortisol in my blood. I would love some insulin to help me, bring that level down. So that's why a lot of people crave those carbs when they are stressed, because their cortisol is high. If you know that you're not just stressed from friends and family and work, that you actually did something very taxing on the water and there's real cortisol in your system and the energy needs to be burned, absolutely eat that higher glycemic carb and enjoy it, and know that the insulin is not wreaking havoc on your body if it has plenty of cortisol to interact with and neutralize. Does anybody have any last minute questions? I'm gonna end this at 7:30, so so we don't go all night long.
Are you excited for your big paddle?
Oh yes, next week, Bimini to the mainland. I'm so excited, guys.
And we can track, right? There's somewhere.
Yeah, I think the event's gonna give us spot trackers. I also have a personal Garmin InReach, and I will set that up, and I'll probably share that on my Instagram as well, so people can track me through my Garmin Connect account.
Well, we're hoping to do the Cayuga race, so maybe we'll see you there.
Oh, that'll be so much fun. Hope to see you guys.
I'll have to implement what you taught me, so.
Yay! With a new straight paddle, too.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
That'll make a big difference. All right. Last minute burning questions. I hope I answered what everybody wanted to know. All right. I'm seeing some thumbs ups.
Yeah, Brill. Thank you very much.
All right.
For your time.
Oh, thanks for staying up late, Amy.
It's half midnight. Way past bedtime.
Yeah, I know. I gotta go eat some dinner. So, all right, guys.
Bye.
Thanks, April.
Thank you. All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye.